Chapter 7. Diddle Iddle Dang Time. At 2 a.m, I met Marcia behind the bushes in our front garden. The first thing I did was ask her how you could tell if your mum or dad were about to leave.
Don't be stupid, Rob. I don't know how you manage to cope with the inside of your head. It must be dreadful worrying all the time about absolutely everything and nothing at all.
What do you mean? Take a look at yourself. You've got that ridiculous rucksack with you again, stuffed full of rubbish, I bet, just in case. Anyway, your parents are fine. But they quarrel. They don't speak to each other sometimes, and everyone is like that. Look at us. We quarrel too. We're not married, I pointed out. Marcia laughed.
Stop fretting and try relaxing a bit more.
Yeah, well, it's a bit difficult to relax when you live opposite a house stuffed with aliens. I stared across at the dark building opposite. The street was still and silent. The only light came from the orange street lamps. Further up the road, a cat trotted from one side to the other, then back again, and then crossed a third time. Why doesn't that cat make up its mind? I wondered out loud. But I knew how it felt.
Are you ready?
Marcia asked, sounding a touch nervous herself. We slipped out of the garden and ran quickly across the road, up the Vaux's front path, and over to the front door. Marcia crouched down, putting her ear to the letterbox, listening for several seconds.
Not a sound,
she whispered, and nodded to me. I slid the spare key into the lock, and a moment later we were inside. I gently closed the door behind us and leaned back against it, breathing fast. I felt dreadful. My heart was banging away all over the place, like a tumble-dry that had broken free from its moorings. I hope my English teacher sees this. I knew people could die of fright, and now it was happening to me. I breathed hard and clamped both hands over my chest to stop my heart banging its way out through my rib cage. I think I'm having a heart attack, I told Marcia.
Don't be stupid, she scowled. I'm scared too.
Who said I was scared? I squeaked. I said I was having a heart attack. I mean, don't worry too much, will you? Marcia was standing in the dark shadow of the hall, but I could see the whites of her eyes glinting at me.
If you're having a heart attack, then you'd better go home and have a lie down, hadn't you?
I dropped my hands from my chest. It's okay now, I said, breathing more easily. Marcia sort of chuckled and shook her head. What? I asked. What now?
Doesn't matter, Rob. Come on.
We moved up the hallway, ears on alert. For some strange reason, there were two giant-sized fridge freezers parked in the passage. We squeezed past them. Closed doors stood like sinister sentries on either side of us. Marcia pointed to the nearest one. She reached down and began to turn the handle very, very slowly, screwing up her eyes anxiously. She edged the door open and we both stared into the room, trying to make out what was inside. Nothing. Well, no aliens at this rate. Just loads of monitors and computers and top-spec electronic equipment. The Vaux's certainly like their... Ding! The penny dropped into both our brains at the same time. This room was full of high-tech stuff. I mean, full of it. Nobody in their right mind would want so much of it. And it wasn't ordinary TVs. It was weird stuff. Banks and banks of switches and dials, controls and knobs and buttons. Little lights flashed and danced on some of the machines. There were tiny screens and one huge viewing monitor hanging on the wall like a picture that had been stolen. Yeah, okay, I know what you're thinking. How can a picture hang there if it's been stolen? I mean, the picture itself wasn't there. It was like a silent, empty TV screen. Only empty TV screens aren't menacing, and this thing was, and if it was trying to tell us something horrible. This room made the deck of the Starship Enterprise look like something from Blue Peter, and it was obviously some kind of control room. We slipped out of the room and poked around in the kitchen and the back of the house, but there was nothing there. It was time to go upstairs. You know those films where you just see someone's feet going up the shadowy stairs of a dark, dark house? There's really creepy music playing, and every so often a stair gives a faint creak, and the foot pauses for a moment, and then goes on and up. The tension mounts and mounts until you realise you've chewed all your fingernails to bits, and now you're starting on your knuckles, and your eyes are bulging fit to burst, and the blood is ringing in your ears, and you're on hyper alert. It was just like that. Marcia was ahead of me. My eyes were glued to her feet as she went up. Every little creak and she would freeze, listen, and then move on once more, and the spooky music in my head was getting louder and louder. Dee-dum, dee-dum, diddle-diddle-diddle, dang, 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 dang. Rob! Marcia suddenly hissed, making me jump. What?
Stop singing. I wasn't singing. You were. You were going diddle, diddle, dang, or something like that. Shut up.
I clenched my lips shut and followed in silence. We reached the top without any trouble. I pointed to a door on the left, which was slightly ajar. Marcia pushed it open. The bathroom. Nothing strange there. We moved down to the next door. For some reason, I found myself wondering what I would say if we were caught. I tapped Marcia's shoulder and she silently mouthed back at me. What? Let's say we're sleepwalking, I whispered.
What are you going on about now?
If we're caught, we can say that we're sleepwalking. I nodded at her frantically. It seemed a good idea to me, but Marcia didn't look very impressed.
What, both of us? We both end up sleepwalking in the same house, in the same room, on the same night? Do you really think super intelligent aliens are going to believe that?
They might. Anyhow, have you got a better idea?
Yes. If they wake up, we run for our lives, okay?
It's not very sophisticated, I grunted. That was in last week's spelling test too. The handle squeaked as Marcia carefully turned it. She edged the door open, and there they were. And I mean, there they were. 4 aliens lined up like bugs in a rug. They seemed to hang there in the gloom, still, silent and fast asleep. Even in the darkness we could make out their sallow skin. It looked smooth, shiny and hard. A faint flickering glow surrounded each body like an aura. The bodies themselves were shaped like large jars, with broad shoulders that tapered down to a point at the bottom, like a wasp's sting. They each had 3 very thin legs. There didn't seem to be any kind of head, but tentacles sprouted from the open neck, at least 10 to each alien. The tentacles were as long as their bodies, and from time to time they moved slightly. I could see they were covered with a spiralling line of frills, running from shoulder to tip. Something about those frills made me think, poison. How long Marcia and I stood there gazing at these monsters, I don't know. All I could think was these creatures really are aliens. There are aliens in the house across the road.
Aliens?
Marcia nudged me and mimed taking a photograph. I nodded and slipped the rucksack from my shoulder. I undid the top and searched for the camera. I pulled out the spare torch and placed it quietly on the floor. I got out several boxes of plasters, toenail clippers, a sling for a broken arm, and a thermometer.
We want to take their photograph, hissed Marcia, not their temperature. Hurry up.
I rummaged inside the bag again, found a road map of Europe and put it on the floor.
What's that for?
In case we got lost.
We're in the house across the road. How could we get lost?
Suppose they kidnap us and take us away in their spaceship.
A map of Europe won't be much use, will it?
Growled Marcia. Maybe she was right, but I still found it comforting. At last I located the camera and lifted it quietly from the rucksack. Marcia scowled but gave me a thumbs up sign. I removed the lens cap, got all 4 aliens lined up in the viewfinder, and then had an awful thought.
What happens if the flash wakes them up? I told you, run for it.
I swallowed nervously. Can we stand nearer the door then? Marcia moved towards the door and I followed. I put the viewfinder to my eye once more, took a deep breath and pressed the button. Nothing happened. For several seconds Marcia and I stood there, frozen with tension. Then I tried again, but still nothing happened. I took the camera and peered at it in confusion.
Why doesn't it work?
She asked. I lowered the camera slowly and looked up into Marcia's face. It hasn't got any film in it, I said.
Oh, Rob!
Instantly, a loud humming filled the room, like a gigantic swarm of killer bees stirring into life. The long tentacles began to rustle, their tiny frills sniffing and feeling the air.
Run for it!
Yelled Marcia, and we practically fell down the stairs and went shooting out of the house like bullets from a gun. We raced down the road, round the corner, along the next street, round another corner, and had almost reached the town centre before we slowed down and stopped. We collapsed, panting in the dark doorway of her shop.
It's okay,
Marcia croaked, looking back down the road.
There's no sign of them.
I leaned back against the door, feeling its solid, cold hardness press into my back. It was very reassuring. What do we do now? I asked.
I don't know.
Those were real aliens, Marcia.
I know.
From outer space.
Yeah.
I mean, they were real aliens.
I know. Stop going on.
We've got to do something, I whined. Marcia shuffled her long legs anxiously.
Police? I don't think so, she said. Not after last time. They'll just ring our parents again, and this time we shall really be in trouble.
We were both beginning to calm down a bit. Not a lot, but I reckon my heart had slowed from about 3,000 beats per second to a mere 300. It even felt as if it was back in the right place behind my ribs and not slopping about round my ankles as if my trousers had fallen down.
They don't know it was us, Marcia pointed out. I'm sure they didn't see us. We leave everything for tonight, but tomorrow you put some film in that camera and we go back and get the photograph.
But they'll be suspicious.
Stop worrying, Rob. They'll think it was the cat or something.
Really? Marcia didn't sound very convincing. We slipped back to our homes. The next day was a Saturday, so I was able to sleep in a bit. Even so, Mum had difficulty in waking me and I was so exhausted. She kept shaking me. Rob, wake up now. Norman's come to see you. I sat up with a jerk. Norman? Alarm bells began to go off in my head and I rubbed my eyes. Norman Vork? At that moment he appeared in my doorway of the bedroom, one hand behind his back. He gazed across at me with a horrible smirk and then lifted his arm.
I think this rucksack is yours, he said.